For years I believed I truly understood my wife. I had faith in the steady rhythm of our marriage, built on a quiet connection that didn't need words. After a decade together, our life had settled into a familiar routine, comfortable and consistent. I never questioned it. At least, not until tonight. She entered with that same cheerful expression she always wore after being away. Her suitcase rolled across the hardwood with a familiar clatter that filled the house. "Hey, babe," Marlene said lightly, her tone as easygoing as ever, like nothing was out of place. Like everything was exactly as it should be. But for me, something had shifted. As I looked at her, really looked, I noticed a subtle change. There was something in her gaze, a spark I hadn't seen in years. She appeared more carefree, almost buoyant. "You miss me?" she asked with a playful grin, slipping off her shoes like she had done 100 times before. I laughed, though it felt forced. "Of course." She sighed and stretched, her arms lifting overhead. "I'm so wiped out. That trip wore me out." Her words were perfectly ordinary. But the way she said them didn't feel quite right, just slightly off, enough to make a knot form in my stomach. There was a different scent lingering on her, not just hotel soap, but a faint trace of cologne I didn't recognize. I tried to push the unease aside, told myself I was probably overreacting. Maybe I was just imagining things. But then her phone buzzed. I wasn't even looking for it, but the screen lit up at just the right angle for me to catch a glimpse of the message. "Miss you already. Can't wait for next time." A red heart emoji followed. Marlene noticed my eyes flick toward the phone, and her hand darted out to grab it with unnatural speed. She let out a laugh, too loud, too quick. "Oh, that? Just my coworker being silly," she said with a breezy tone that felt too rehearsed. Something in me shifted then. I had never been the possessive type. I never snooped through her phone or questioned her stories. But right in that moment, a deep instinct told me this wasn't a harmless joke. And for the first time in our 10 years together, I found myself wondering if I really knew the woman standing in front of me. I watched her closely as she tried to brush it all off with another smile, her hand still gripping the phone a little too tightly. The atmosphere between us had changed, heavier now, filled with unspoken tension. Marlene had always been quick-witted and smooth with her words. But this time I saw a flicker in her eyes that didn't belong. She was nervous. Turning away, she placed her phone face down on the counter, a seemingly casual gesture that felt too calculated. She smiled again, trying to move past what had just happened. "So, what did you get up to while I was away?" she asked, walking toward the kitchen like everything was normal. I followed behind her, watching every little movement, every slight change in expression. Was I just imagining all this? Overanalyzing a text? My gut refused to let it go. I leaned back against the kitchen counter, arms folded. "Not much. Work, gym, had dinner with Nolan a few nights ago." "That's nice," she replied distantly as she opened the fridge. She grabbed a water bottle and twisted the cap, her hands just slightly too tense. "What about you?" I asked, my eyes locked on her. She took a sip, then responded with a small laugh. "Oh, you know, the usual. Long meetings, lots of networking, barely any sleep." Her tone was light, but the words felt overly polished, like a script she had memorized. She didn't mention who the meetings were with or even where they had taken place, just vague talk of a conference. I nodded slowly, my voice calm. "Where'd you stay again?" She paused, her face blank for half a second. "Ha! The hotel," I said evenly. "You mentioned it earlier, but I forgot. Was it the Crescent?" There was a moment, just long enough to notice, before she replied, "Yeah, the Crescent." She nodded as though reassuring herself. "Really nice place. You'd have liked it." Except that wasn't what she'd said before leaving. A few days earlier, she'd clearly mentioned the Oakmont. A minor detail, sure. Most wouldn't have caught the inconsistency. But I had. And now I couldn't ignore it. That was the first lie. The rest of the night drifted by in a haze of casual conversation and habitual routines. We sat down for dinner. She asked me about work, I asked about her trip. On the surface, everything was fine. But underneath it all, I could feel the cracks beginning to spread. Later that night, while she was upstairs taking a shower, I noticed her suitcase still by the front door, only half-zipped. Something about the way it sat there, untouched, as though she hadn't even bothered to unpack, drew my attention. I hesitated. I knew I shouldn't snoop. But I couldn't stop myself. I knelt down and slowly pulled the zipper the rest of the way open. Inside, folded neatly, was a dress I had never seen before, elegant, sleek, clearly high-end. Not something she'd wear for business. And beneath her clothes, barely tucked out of sight, was something else. A tie. A man's tie. My chest tightened, my heartbeat pounded as I stared at it, hand hovering in midair. This was no longer just a suspicion or a vague sense of unease. Something was undeniably off. I didn't even reach for the tie, I simply stared at it as if avoiding contact might somehow make it disappear or prove it wasn't real. Deep down, I wished I was just overthinking things, grasping at shadows. But I knew that wasn't true. Slowly rising to my feet, my heartbeat thundered in my ears, my entire body strung tight with tension. I zipped the suitcase back up exactly as it had been, not disturbing a single fold, then stepped away and let out a soft breath. The sound of the shower running upstairs still echoed through the house. She was completely unaware of what I had just uncovered. I made my way back into the kitchen, gripping the edge of the counter like it could ground me. I needed to collect myself. I needed air clarity. But how does one even begin to process something that hasn't fully landed yet? I tried to analyze it all rationally, a man's tie, a brand new dress, and a hotel name that didn't match what she had told me. On their own, perhaps they could be innocent. Together, though? No. There was a pattern forming, and I couldn't ignore it. My mind scrambled for answers, replaying the past few months. Had I missed something obvious? Were there nights she came home late and brushed it off too easily? Had there been business trips before this one where something felt off but I chose not to notice? I picked up her phone and opened her messages, hesitating for a long moment. I had never snooped before. Never even had the urge. But now? The uncertainty of not knowing the truth felt far worse than crossing that boundary. Just as I was about to unlock the screen, her voice drifted down the stairs. "Hey, what are you doing?" Spinning around, I felt my heart leap into my throat. There she was, Marlene, wrapped in a towel, damp hair cascading over her shoulders. She was smiling, but her eyes, there was something there I couldn't quite figure out. I quickly put the phone down. "Oh, nothing. Just checking a few emails," I said. She nodded and stepped into the room. That shower was everything. I swear I still had hotel water on me. I managed a half-laugh. "Yeah, I can imagine." She wandered over to the cabinet, pulled out a glass, and filled it at the sink. "You seem tense," she said, observing me closely. "Long day," I offered with a nonchalant shrug. She smiled knowingly, her expression soft. "Well, now I'm back. Maybe I can help you unwind." There was something in her tone that unsettled me, a shift so subtle yet undeniable. Something between us had changed, some invisible barrier had quietly formed. She was watching me carefully. And in that moment, I knew I wasn't the only one trying to read between the lines. This was a game now, and this was the first move. I let her float around the kitchen like nothing had happened. She laughed at little things, her fingers idly tracing the rim of her glass. Her behavior was too relaxed, too practiced. I decided to probe a bit. "You never mentioned," I said casually, leaning back. "What did you do for fun during the trip?" She blinked, slightly thrown off. "Ha! You know, after the conference. Evenings and such. Did your team go out?" There it was, a tiny pause. "Oh," she said, flicking her hair behind her shoulder. "Yeah, we had a few team dinners. Just typical work stuff." I nodded slowly. "Where?" Another delay. She took a long sip before answering. "Oh, mostly just the hotel bar. We also tried a couple of nearby spots." I kept my face neutral. "Sounds like it was a good time." She visibly eased, the smile returning to her face. "It was. You would have loved the food there." She didn't realize I already knew she wasn't staying at the Oakmont like she claimed. But I wasn't ready to confront her yet. I smiled back, holding my cards close. What I didn't anticipate was how that night would unfold. After she drifted off to sleep, I lay awake, my eyes fixed on the ceiling. I had the tie. I had the lie about the hotel. I had the strange message I couldn't explain. But I didn't have the full story. Not yet. I knew rushing things could ruin any chance I had of uncovering the truth. So I did something completely against my instincts. I waited. And the next morning, while she was in the shower, I went back to her suitcase. This time, I found something new. Hidden between layers of neatly folded clothes was a second phone, face down, no case, untouched. My stomach dropped. This wasn't just a mistake. This wasn't paranoia. This was real. I looked at that phone like it didn't belong in this world, definitely not in ours. I hadn't even touched it yet, but my heart was pounding like I'd been running. My breaths came slow, deliberate. People don't hide extra phones for innocent reasons. Still, I wasn't ready to leap to conclusions. Reaching for it, my fingers brushed the cool, unblemished surface. No cover, no scuffs, practically brand new. I flipped it over and pressed the power button. A lock screen blinked to life. Enter passcode. My jaw tightened. Of course it was secured. Marlene might be careless, but not when it counted. Carefully, I returned the phone to its original hiding place, tucking it back just as I'd found it. I wasn't going to blow everything now, because now I had proof. My wife was living a double life, and I was going to uncover every part of it. The performance began. When Marlene entered the kitchen, freshly showered and more radiant than ever, I slipped right into character. "Morning," she said with a soft yawn, stretching as she walked in. I gave her a warm smile and kissed her on the cheek, pretending everything was perfectly normal. "Morning. Coffee's ready." She smiled brightly, grabbing a mug. "You're the best," she said cheerfully. She had no clue that just the night before, I had stood mere feet away from her hidden truth. Sitting across from her at the table, I watched her every move, the subtle shifts in her body language, the slight avoidance of eye contact when she spoke about her recent trip. "Did you sleep okay?" I asked casually. She gave a small nod. "Yeah, I always sleep better at home." A clear lie. I knew the truth because I'd been watching. She hadn't rested peacefully at all, twisting, turning, and waking up several times. I'd opened my eyes 3 different times during the night only to find her staring blankly at the ceiling, lost in her thoughts. But what, or more likely, who was she thinking about? Leaning back in my chair, I took a slow sip of my coffee. "Got anything planned today?" I asked. She shrugged lightly. "Just work," she answered. "Meetings, meetings, and more meetings." Her response was intentionally vague, designed to avoid detail. Carefully chosen words to keep things hidden. But the facade was starting to show cracks. Now I had something tangible, real clues, and I wasn't about to ignore them. As soon as she walked out the door for work, I sprang into action. Hacking into her phone? Too risky. That would tip her off. I needed a quieter approach. So I did something simpler. I pulled up our phone bill. Marlene believed she was being discreet, but she had overlooked one key thing. We shared a mobile plan. With a few clicks, I accessed the online records and scrolled through her call and text history. And there it was, an unmistakable pattern. Late-night calls. The same number over and over. Texts sent at strange hours. The activity always escalated when she was traveling for work. Then I spotted it. Calls from a second device. It was listed under a different name, but still billed to our shared account. She must have assumed I'd never bother to look that deeply. Calmly, I wrote down the number, my hands steady despite the turmoil building inside me. I was getting closer to the truth. That evening, once Marlene had drifted off to sleep, I sat in the darkness, phone in hand, illuminated only by the cold light of the screen. The number she had been calling stared back at me. I could dial it right now, hear his voice, the man who had crept into the private spaces of my wife's life. But I paused, because crossing that line meant there was no turning back. And I wasn't ready to hear what that voice might confirm. Still, the truth was already surfacing, whether I was prepared for it or not. I sat in the soft glow of the phone screen, the number looming large, daring me to act. I was standing on the brink of something that would change everything. If I pressed that button, I'd be hearing from the very man who had taken up the emotional space I once held. I wasn't ready for that reality. Not yet. So instead, I took a quieter step. A calculated move. I copied the number and ran it through a reverse lookup service. Watching the results load slowly was agonizing, every second stretching longer than the last. When the result finally appeared, it read, "Private listing. No name, no address, just a generic corporate tag." The number had been masked. But then, I noticed something else, an associated email address. That was the thread she hadn't hidden. I held my breath as I clicked into the next layer, using the email to search through social media and business networks. And then I found him, Landon Frazier. At first, the name meant nothing. Just another stranger among millions. But I kept digging, and then his LinkedIn profile appeared, and my stomach turned. He wasn't just anyone. He was listed as Executive Director of New Accounts and Client Relations at Winston & Clark Marketing, Marlene's company. This wasn't a random connection. This wasn't a brief lapse in judgment. This was intentional. This man was someone she saw nearly every single day. My jaw tightened, my grip on the phone growing more firm. This wasn't just a mistake. It was deliberate. What she didn't know was that now I had the upper hand. I locked my phone and exhaled slowly, trying to steady the rising wave of emotions inside me. I wasn't going to confront her, not yet, because now I had something more powerful than anger. I had information, and if she wanted to keep pretending everything was fine, she had no idea how carefully I was about to play this new game. The following morning, the scent of fresh coffee and the soft hum of Marlene's voice greeted me. It was rare to see her up before I was dressed, calm, and acting as if nothing had changed. But everything had shifted. I stayed in bed for a moment, staring at the ceiling, my mind repeating the name that had changed everything. Landon Frazier. It felt like a stain on what I once believed was a perfect life. But today wasn't for breakdowns. Today was for paying attention. Stretching and letting out a fake yawn, I made my way downstairs. Marlene turned to me, her face lighting up as she handed me a steaming cup of coffee. Exactly the way I liked it. A silent apology. An attempt to cover the guilt she hadn't confessed. I smiled back, keeping up the act. "Wow," I said, my voice calm. "You're up early." She laughed softly, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. "Yeah, I just felt refreshed this morning. Must have been a good night's sleep." Another lie. She hadn't slept peacefully at all. I had heard the faint buzzing of her phone under the pillow. I had felt her shift awake, checking it in the quiet moments of the night. She was still communicating with him. Even now, she continued to keep secrets, walking barefoot across the kitchen tiles, her movements graceful, playing the role of a devoted wife flawlessly. It was almost admirable, almost. She was pushing her limits, and I observed quietly. Sitting at the kitchen island, I sipped my coffee while my eyes followed her. "Got a packed schedule today?" I asked with a tone of nonchalance. She nodded as she set toast on a plate. "Meetings. The usual stuff. Might end up working late tonight." The word "might" lingered. I tilted my head, studying her. "Got dinner plans after?" Her response was barely delayed, but I noticed. "No, just work-related. A few of us might grab a drink later." There it was, the subtle dodge. A practiced lie that flowed so effortlessly now. I almost admired the ease with which she said it. "Sounds nice," I replied, placing my cup down. "Anyone I'd know?" She stopped for just a moment, barely noticeable, but I caught it, a flicker in her eyes, a brief moment of calculation. Then came the smile. "Oh, just the usual team." Another vague answer, another evasion. I let it go, but only on the surface, because what she didn't realize was that I had already been following the trail. Her credit card records told a different story. She had never once gone out for post-work drinks. Not even once. But there were charges from a boutique hotel only a couple of miles from her office. I had dates, times, receipts, every detail. I had everything I needed. That was the night I made my choice. I didn't question her when she left. I didn't obsessively check my phone for updates. I simply remained in the living room, staring at our framed memories, wondering how long they'd been meaningless. At precisely 11:32 in the evening, I heard her come in. Her footsteps were soft, tentative, careful, like she didn't want to wake me. But I was awake. I just stayed still, pretending to sleep, because I had already made up my mind. I wasn't going to argue. I wouldn't accuse or beg for explanations. Instead, I would do the one thing she never expected. I would leave. Quietly. Without resistance. Without a single word. That was the harshest consequence I could offer. Knowing she had destroyed it all without me ever having to fight back. I always imagined that if I ever faced a betrayal like this, I'd fall apart. That I'd scream, demand the truth, ask why. But now that I had seen it for what it was, I felt none of that. No fury, no heartbreak, just a vast, unshakable emptiness. When Marlene crawled into bed beside me that night, something about her had changed. She didn't carry the scent of home anymore. Her skin smelled of a different soap, a different environment. And beneath it all, there was something unfamiliar, evidence of a life that existed without me in it. She turned toward me, her body pressed close like always. If I had still been that same naive man, perhaps I might have believed in the illusion. But that part of me was gone. I couldn't let her falsehoods seep into me anymore. She had no idea what was coming. The next morning, I watched as she went through her usual routine, as if everything was just as it had always been. She kissed me before heading out the door, her performance flawless. It made me wonder if she even believed her own act. She thought she had the upper hand. She had no clue that today was my final day in that house. I had made every arrangement through the night, calmly, carefully. By midday, my belongings were packed, the bank accounts secured, and the lease for a temporary place was already finalized. I wasn't staying to fight. I wasn't staying at all. And that was what Marlene could never comprehend. She thrived on manipulation, on carefully weaving truth and fiction until even she couldn't tell the difference. That gave her power. But I was stripping that power away by refusing to play. When she returned, she would find the house empty. No explanations. No goodbye letters. Just stillness. Silence. Because there was nothing left to explain. I had seen the truth with my own eyes. And that was all I needed. By the time she walked through the front door that evening, I was already gone. I left the house key on the counter, stepped outside, and never looked back. I didn't leave any messages or make any calls. For the first time in what felt like forever, I was free. Whatever came next, she would have to deal with it on her own. As I breathed in the cool evening air, I felt lighter. The burden I had carried for so long had vanished. The uncertainty, the quiet dread, it was all gone. Just freedom remained. Driving away from that place we once called home, I didn't feel sorrow. I didn't feel regret. I felt peace. I had spent too many years investing in something that had already fallen apart. I had loved someone who never valued that love. But I wasn't angry. This wasn't the end. This was the beginning. A chance to rebuild from the ground up. That first night in my new apartment, I sat on a modest balcony watching the city shimmer below. I had no one waiting on me. No secrets to unravel. No falsehoods to decode. Just me. And the feeling, it was genuinely good. I began reaching out to old friends. I revisited hobbies I had long abandoned. I turned my focus inward, not as a partner or a backup option, but simply as myself. And slowly, I began to see things clearly. I hadn't truly lost anything. If anything, what I truly walked away with was something far greater in worth, clear perspective, inner strength, and the courage to begin anew. That was the real victory. I never contacted Marlene again. I didn't follow her life from a distance, didn't go searching for any sort of closure. The truth is, I didn't need any of that. I had already come out on top, not by causing her pain, not by revealing her wrongs, but by simply putting myself first. And honestly, that turned out to be the smartest and most empowering choice I've ever made.